Thank you for joining us on The Auctioneer. My guest today is Casey Daniel, an auctioneer from Stuart, Florida. Casey is involved with real estate auctions, real estate development, and has done equipment and lots of things over his time in the auction industry. I was fortunate to meet Casey Daniel about 20 years ago at the Worldwide College of Auctioneering. We were classmates and became good friends over that time. It's a pleasure. Very pleased to bring Casey on as my first guest of the Auctioneer Podcast. The Auctioneer Podcast is fueled by RocketBid, the next generation auction platform built for pros who actually sell. Run live, online, or influencer-style auctions. Manage your inventory and consigners, and keep your brand front and center. No middlemen, no hidden fees, just power, control, and speed. RocketBid.io. Everything you need to run your auction business your way. Technology built by auctioneers for auctioneers. How you doing, Casey?
Oh, fantastic. It was an honor to get to meet you as well, Dustin. It was definitely a great experience. I can't believe it's already been 20 years that we've been in the auction business since we were two kids trying to, figure out how to make our tongues move that fast.
That's right. You say 20 years, it probably feels like 50, in the auctioneers world. But anyways, so getting back to the Worldwide College of Auctioneering, it was funny when I met KC. It was a course in Mason City, Iowa, in February, the dead of winter. Okay, KC being a guy from Florida, and me being a guy from Canada.
It was.
I see him walking into the hotel, and he had a golf jacket on. Okay, he was not prepared for this weather. It was so cold in Mason City, Iowa, that I came from Nova Scotia and I found it frigid cold. Okay, but I said, "Hey, I got an extra coat. You want to borrow it?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then we were buddies ever since, and we worked together. KC is also a second generation auctioneer like myself. So why don't we go into that, Casey? So how did you get started with the auction industry, and how were you exposed with the auction industry? Maybe you can break down into that.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from a small town in Kentucky, Owensboro, Kentucky, and there's a great auction family there, the Kurtz auction family. I think it's maybe on its fourth generation now. And my dad worked for Bill Kurtz there, and I was the little kid that was running around the pie auctions, and so I'd always heard the auction chant, even as I was growing up as a kid. But then my dad moved down to Stuart, Florida when I was probably 10 years old, and he opened up his own auction firm, Carlin Daniel and Associates. And I worked there for 10 years and then started my own auction company. And that's how I was in it. It was just the family business, and it was just what I've always known that he did. And I never thought that I would be doing that, but ended up life has a funny way of putting you somewhere that you never thought you would be.
That's a very, very common story. I mean, being a second generation auctioneer, being forced to help out when you're, slave labor, child labor, growing up and that sort of thing. I remember being like 9, 10, 11 12 years old, and the old man would have me running things around and that sort of thing. I remember being 5 years old and having to work running the old school days for computers, the auction shit, right? From the block to the cashier
before wireless was around.
My pay was a GI Joe. I would work a whole day for a GI Joe. Right?
They could bribe us with toys, Transformers, any of that stuff,
100%, right? So that is right, and that's the one thing about the auction industry is that a lot of it does stem from family. Everybody stepping in, helping out, and being a part of it. And it's funny. It's a how many times do you often get questions like, how'd you become an auctioneer? How did you get exposed to that business? And that probably happens all the time. So fast forward a little bit. So you've worked at Carlin Daniel and Associates for 10 years, and you decided now's time. What brought you to that?
Let's see. That was interesting. So I guess it was right at about 2000 and I want to say 9 right before I was in the bid calling contest that we were, running in a traditional auction house, and there was kind of a thing coming around called eBay and a lot of these online auctions. And, he did not, my dad at the time didn't want to go in that direction. And, being the old school auctioneer, they used to think the fax machine was a fad. So they didn't want to really believe any of the new technology. They're kind of very old school. And so it was just, wanting to be able to make my own stripes is when I kind of set out on my own. After I got out of law school, I went to work for a lawyer, and but it's always had the passion to come back into the auction business. And so, right at 2008, 2009 is when I started my own auction business. And and then I think it was 2010 that I won that bid calling contest, and that really kind of took it to another level. And yeah, so it was. I think the decision was just the entrepreneurial spirit that I wanted to do it kind of my way, and so kind of forged out my path, and created Associate Auctions, and from there we did a lot of government sales and equipment sales, real estate sales, and we were just kind of on the back end of the Great Recession down here in Florida. After there was a string of foreclosures, and we had Chinese drywall, and so just all of those times when you have, I think, a difficult market, the auctioneer kind of emerges and is able to help move the market to the next level wherever it has to go. And so it was a real interesting time to be in Florida and doing auctions because you're really at the front line of what was going on.
That's right. Wow, that's impressive. So getting back, I heard something about bid calling champion. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of people aren't, I guess, aware of this. I'm sure a lot of your listeners would be aware of it. There's the, the National Association of Auctioneers that they put on a worldwide bid calling or auction contest where they go out and they try to find the best bid caller. I have to make sure that I enunciate that really well because I was trying to impress a girl one time and said pig calling, or she heard pig calling contest, and I did not score on that one at all. But one of the things that I think is a misconception an awful lot about, at least how I understand the auction industry, is the chant, which is a wonderful thing that there's a great history with it from the tobacco auctioneers, but it's really only, like, in my world, 1% of what I do, because 99% is marketing. And if I don't have the right people in the crowd, it doesn't matter how good my chant is or how clear I am. I have to make sure that I have the right items to sell and the right people that want those items to sell. So, it's what everybody sees in the auction business, but it is probably 1% of what is the main focus.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I've a lot of old timers in the industry and that sort of thing. You know, have told me over the years that it doesn't matter how good somebody sounds; it's can they sell, right? At the end of the day, can they sell or can they not sell? Right now, I've seen guys that um, definitely possess both, but other ones not so much, right? But big calling is an art form. It really is. It's what draws everybody to the auction industry. Um, it's funny, and there's a lot of auctions that I hold, and I'm online. I'm doing my chant and that sort of thing, and it's being able to, or live, and so many people know you, but you don't know them, right? Because it's almost like in their own auction world, you've got celebrity status, right? At least to your own little geographic range, right? Everywhere you go, somebody knows, right? So, you know,
You
um,
don't know how far your voice
tell me
carries. Yeah,
more.
you're right.
That's right. Tell me more about like Casey Daniel as a person.
Oh,
Life,
absolutely. Sure.
family,
I'm a
whatever.
proud father of two daughters. I have a 26-year-old daughter that's married down in Lantana that I'm extremely proud of. And then I also have another daughter that's 19 up at UF, go Gators. and
Oh, there
she's
you go.
studied international business, and she might go on to law school as well. But just both of them have just always been my driving force in making sure that I was being able to provide for them. And a lot of times after I talk about people wanting to say, "Oh, how do you do the auction chant?" and they kind of want to hear about that. And I'm sure you and I, went through the same school, so we usually take everybody through the whole Betty Botter routine, and then I'll.
Okay,
Sorry.
stop. Let's hear your Betty
Oh,
Botter.
you're
Let's
gonna
go.
call me out like that. So,
I'm putting you on the
but
spot, buddy.
so for those of you that didn't go to the Worldwide School of Auctioneering and don't know this tongue twister, I usually, and Dustin, if you will, humor me because I am on the spot here and I don't mind being that for you. Will you repeat after me, because I hate kind of having to do that all by myself? Betty Botter.
Okay, you
Well,
want to
yeah.
go
So I'll
first,
just
and then I'll
Betty
follow you up.
Botter. Are we just gonna go all the way to it? Well,
Oh no, you're gonna do a
I
full.
will, but
Give
I
me
was trying to
your
warm
your
myself
part
up
there.
ahead of time, but you're going to just throw me right into it. Because usually the whole
Do you
time
want
that I usually do it,
you
well,
want me
I'll
to
go
go
ahead and do the
first,
whole
or
thing. No, I don't want to be shown up. I'm not following you. I know how you
okay?
are. I'm going to go
All right.
first, and I'll let the crowd really get to see the guy do it. So typically, I will
Sure.
tell
Okay,
people,
let's do it.
and if you will play not an auctioneer for a moment, Dustin, and just a layman that has never heard this before, I'll say to them like, okay, sure. If you want to learn how to be an auctioneer, I'll teach you. It's really quick. Just repeat after me, and then I'll show you how to do it. So Betty Botter, and then I would want you to
Betty
bought some
Botter.
butter,
Yes. Bought
but
some
she
butter,
said,
but
"This
she
butter is
said
bitter."
this
So
butter's
she
bitter.
bought. I know this is
So
painful
she
for
bought.
you. A bit of better butter.
Fuck, this is hard. A bit of
Put
better
it in
butter.
her bitter batter.
Put it in her bitter
Made her
batter.
bitter batter better.
Made her bitter
So
butter
it's
better.
better.
So
Betty
it's better.
Botter bought a
Betty
bit,
Botter
a better
bought a bit.
butter. And so this
Bit
is
butter.
the point
You know
that
what? That's probably going to make me
I know,
forget.
and I think it's just so that people kind of get it the
Yeah,
first time that
yeah.
they hear it. And then I would say, if it would depend on how well you could feed your family, how well you could say that, it starts sounding like Betty butter, bought some butter, but she said about a bit of butter, make my butter better, so she bought a bit of butter, put it in a bit of butter, made her bit of butter, so it's better, bit of butter, bought a bit of butter. And then after their eyes and their
That's a
mouth
good
are
one.
like wide open, then you kind of say, then I'm at 200,000, and now would have been a 250, now three would have been a 300, and you just say that's the cadence that
Mm-hmm.
you get. But again, we're just communicating. But that's, again, the drive of my daughters is really what pushed me to make sure that I was the best in the auction business, to try to bring that home. And that
That's
was, but
awesome.
please let the audience get to hear the Barker CEO go for it.
Really? All right. Betty butter, butter, said butter, put it in my batter, make my batter, bishop, butter, better, butter, put it in a bit of batter, made a bit of better, so the better, butter, butter. Boom. There we go.
So 20 years, we did that
Damn.
so many times as a full room of people doing that in a room. You never thought that we would still be carrying that with us this long, but it's still one of the things I use to warm up my tongue if I'm getting ready to do a benefit auction or going out. That the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
just a familiar exercise that it's just kind of ready to go.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, they lock a lot of good foundation
Oh
and stuff. When Ooh, no, we ain't gonna do that. No. Yeah, our producers asked us to do in unison. I said no.
We
That's
could
okay.
be the dueling auctioneers. That would be fun. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be cool. So you did the Florida State. You were the Florida State bid
Thank you.
calling
Yeah, man.
champion. Amazing, excellent. Who would have thought? My buddy from auction school. There you go. And then did you ever go to the NAA
I
compete?
did, and I like to think that I came in like 16th because they only ranked 15 people. So I just said I must have come in 16th because I wasn't in the top 15. So I feel like I came in 16th. But I did it once, and I mean, there's just some phenomenal auctioneers in our industry, and so it was definitely another level to go to the national versus Florida. Great auctioneers in Florida, and I think maybe all the great auctioneers had got it, and it was just kind of my turn to kind of move over to it. But yeah, it was a great experience, and highly recommend anybody who hasn't been to a convention to kind of go just for the fellowship, and just usually you're the only auctioneer in the room, so it's nice to go to a room full of other auctioneers.
That's right. That's right. I'm pretty sure I'm going this year.
Oh, good. Oh, I bet you
Check
would.
it out.
Yeah, that would be.
I believe it's in July in San Antonio, Texas. I
Ooh,
believe is
okay.
to go. Never been, so that should be
Yeah,
fun.
I think
Yeah,
Mike
that should
Jones
be a
is
lot of
down
fun.
there. So yeah, that'd be great. That'd be a good time.
Yeah. So given that, being exposed to many auctioneers, one through auction school and competition, and just in the who would you consider to be maybe some of your
Oof.
mentors or some of your inspirational people
Well, I
out
mean,
there?
I have to put my dad really at the top. I mean, I think he, even though it
Hundred
was,
percent.
very difficult working within his organization, and I was always teasing that I was the SOB at my office because I was son of boss. And so it was always
Mm-hmm.
a difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I started at the very bottom in the database and worked every single spot within the auction business, which I think made it very powerful moving forward because I had such a great education. So I'd have to thank him. We had there's a guy named Bobby Smith who's auctioneer number 7 in the state of Florida, who is just a phenomenal auctioneer, and I really appreciated him an awful lot. There's a guy by the name of John McGinnis, and he's an auctioneer in Florida and in New Hampshire. He auctioned off the JFK's bomber jacket, and he did some other presidential stuff, and just a phenomenal antique real estate auctioneer, old school, and really appreciated him an awful lot. One of my, I guess, heroes within the auction industry, and he really wasn't an auctioneer, but he was a lawyer, was Steve Profit. And I got to see him many times,
Mm-hmm.
and that really drove one of the reasons I wanted to go to law school too, because he just really elevated the auction business to a whole other level. I think he was working with the JP King team for a while, and he was their corporate counsel. But he was just every bit of a Southern gentleman, and just was kind of a model for me a lot. And then also Paul Bear, who was at the Worldwide College of Auctioneering. I think he's head of the Automobile Auctioneering Association too. But Paul Bear was just a phenomenal teacher as well. And and I have to say, you too, Dustin, you're what you've always done within the industry. I've always really appreciated, and you've been innovative, and I think you're a professional communicator as well as a digital marketer. And so I think you've been able to have, the old traditional auction in one hand and then new technology in the other hand. And I've always admired that. Even when we worked together in our own business in the past, I was always impressed with that. So I have to say, you're somebody that I've definitely admired and learned from.
Well, thank you. That's I think you're probably the only one out there, but hey, that's great.
Well, you got one. You
Appreciate
got
that.
one there. Come on, you got one.
I got one follower, right? I got one follower, right? Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. So let's talk about the grind a little bit. Okay,
Mhm.
let's talk about the grind. What a lot of people don't realize go behind the auction. Okay, because let's face it, they see the glamour part. They see the guy on the block, they're auctioning off, they're selling stuff for all kinds of money, that sort of thing. They must be loaded to the gills, let's dispel some misconceptions of the auctioneer. Okay. So tell me, how hard is the auction industry?
So we were kind of talking about the 20 years in it, and it seemed like 50. I think that in the last 20 years, the auction industry has had more change than in 200 years. I mean, the only innovation that probably came
Right.
within the auction business was the, speaker, and that you could now have a digital speaker, and that was really probably the biggest advancement. But then once you started having, digital cataloging and the internet, having the internet come into the business, I think really changed the game an awful lot. Let me take your items and I'm going to sell it for whatever I can sell it for, and you don't get to tell me what price it is.
Hmm.
That's not an easy sell. And so someone really either has to have a need, a want, or they have to believe in your ability to an nth degree. So yeah, the business of going out and getting it is definitely looking for that opportunity where you're needed, and not, often I'll say you need to have two elements. You need to have auction property, and you need to have an auction seller. And so being able to find those
Hmm.
two things is like a needle in a haystack. You might have to look through 100 deals to find one. And so you're really,
Right.
having to do an awful lot. And in the market we've been in here in South Florida, the real estate values have just shot up so much that the property didn't stay around long enough to go to auction. However, if the realtors
Hmm.
understood what we could do with them and how we could work with them, we all would have been able to make a lot more money because they were having auctions without us. They were like, I have this guy offering this much. The next line, I have this guy offering more. And
Right.
so they were basically running auctions and just didn't even know it. So, the auction industry has definitely drastically changed.
What's going to bring the best value? Absolutely an auction.
Every
You know.
economist will tell you that if you want the highest price, you need to have an auction. The stock market is an auction, commodities are done by an auction, and even Google prices their search algorithm by an auction to be at the top level of where they are. So auction is an economic law. And so when I studied in Australia, auctions are like 80% of the real estate market there. So in Australia, they have really embraced
Wow.
auctions, and that's why I went over to study for a month, and it was fascinating to see it. However, it was very much slanted towards the seller, and I always like kind of right being in the middle where I'm working for the seller, but I'm getting paid by the buyer. So that puts me right in the middle where it's like,
Hmm.
hey, I owe a duty to both sides. And so I'm not trying to push too much on either side. And in Australia, they believed you had three bites at the apple in an auction. If you have a great property, somebody's going to offer you a lot and you'll sell it before the auction. If you bring it to the day of the auction and maybe you get it sold, but really the auction is to humble the seller so that they see that their property is really not worth what they think it's worth. And then the day after the auction, all the bottom feeders start hitting them in the gut with, well, see what happened at your house. I'll give you this much. And so it was just another, I didn't like the whole process because I like the clean auction. If we're going to do it one day, there's no, there's no sellers holding anything back. And now that the buyers know that there is going to be something sold, and so I think that purest form of an auction is my favorite. But however, concessions have to be made to get deals.
That's right. That's right. And it's a big responsibility as well. I mean, where you're playing both sides are not playing, but where you're working for
Oh
both
yeah.
sides. You're working on being fair and equitable to both parties. I mean, absolutely. So speaking of both sides and that sort of thing, let's hear some crazy stories with customers. Okay. This is one thing as an auctioneer we all have to deal with. Okay. No names, but situations. Tell me about some situations you might have found yourself in that was really difficult and hard to work through.
I mean, there's always some crazy situations on real estate. You have a certain level of person that you pre-qualify by them having to bring a cashier's check or cash. So, most of the shenanigans happen where somebody just shows up and they're coming to an auction house, and, all they had to do was give their driver's license, and now they basically have a credit card and they're getting to play out with all the other people. Those people would tend to kind of come out that some situations where people overbid, didn't realize they were bidding, didn't have the money, and you kind of have to back up. And but you in Florida we have something called the Florida flake factor. So like if we're bidding on a car and you were the high bidder, we would kind of come up to you and go ahead and get a $500 cash deposit. Oh, this person didn't have
Right.
cash.
Mhm.
Oh, hey, we got a problem right now. And so we try to hedge off any of
Right.
those problems. In real estate, we also get the backup bidder so that if the highest bidder, for whatever reason doesn't want to close, we keep the 10% deposit and then we close with the backup bidder. So we actually make more money that way. So we try to orchestrate it. So if we have bad people, which as an auction, you're wanting to get a deal, but they're on good behavior because they have what you want. And so you have to really kind of orchestrate it around that. So the auction industry is, people, I think, really fear sometimes the crowd when I'm doing live auctions, and they don't really want to step out of line. I can only imagine online the world as we see with social media, that people get really brave when they're behind a computer screen, but when they're standing in front of you and the entire crowd's looking at them, it kind of, most people kind of level out and don't get too crazy, that I'm thinking. But no, I mean, I've had sellers crying to me. I mean, I've had bidders angry, and that's a lot of the time what the auctioneer has to do, is it has to be the bridge between both of them and bringing them together. And but yeah, I can't necessarily think of any horror story other than that one that I had. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I have I've lost some auctions that I consider a horror story, because I definitely should have been doing the auction on that. But I've been really
Mm-hmm.
blessed that, most of the time, the things that I've been doing, people usually would, pay for the item. You can't take it unless you pay for it. And real estate, you typically have like a 30-day closing. So the attorneys get involved and deal with it. The one, last one, and I'll get off of this because I am probably talking too much, but you give an auctioneer a microphone, he's
Oh
going to
no,
keep
keep talking,
talking.
bud.
We sold
Yeah.
a 15-acre piece in St. Lucie County, and we
Mm-hmm.
sold it. And when they went to closing, the entire boundary was about a foot and a half off. And so it touched
Oh.
about probably like 15 other properties. And so we had to hold the buyer and seller together for about a year and a half. And I never would have, that one was just probably the one that I was like, this is one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do, because it was, usually you have a 30-day advertising, 30-day closing. So a 60-day window, you can kind of control your world. But having it, a year and a half out before the attorneys to settle and the market, but that deal eventually closed and it was all fine. But that one was probably the one that I was like, probably lost a few years of my life just worrying about that and dealing.
Perfect. So maybe on the flip side, what are some of the most like positive experiences you've had with clients, customers, things that you're like, oh man, that's awesome. I'm happy for them, that kind of thing.
Two stories that come to mind. The first one is an equipment situation. We were doing the town of Jupiter Island, and they had this backhoe that didn't move. They were like, just get it off of the lot. I mean, you could give us $5,000 and we would be happy for it. And I'm like, no, no, let's put it in the auction with all the other equipment, and it'll look nice. It photographed really nice, and I was able to market it. And so I like having big yellow iron to sell. That usually brings a bunch of guys out to the
Mm-hmm.
yard. And so again, they wanted $5,000 for this piece, and hopefully the guy that bought it won't be listening to this channel or whatever. So the first bid, and I call out, and sometimes I'll ask for a number that's a lot higher than I think I'm going to get, because you never know. I'm going to throw it out there. And I was like, ladies and gentlemen, who'll give me $20,000? Let's go. Hand went right up in the air. And I mean, and I
Oh.
had to go 25, like without, and a guy in the crowd was also his eyes as big as he could be, that was helping me set up the equipment. And he said, Casey, I know you're the real one, because when he went to 20 and you went to 25, you didn't even act like that was anybody's business. Like, you just went straight to 25. And then I dropped it down to 21 to see if I could get anybody. Nobody else was anywhere close to this guy. And, everybody was kind of stepped away when he bought it at that 20,000. And I mean, after then, the town of Jupiter Island thought I walked on water, because I had just gotten them, 15,000 more than they ever would have gotten. So that one was a really good story, and an equipment one. And this is one I think that really
Mm-hmm.
defines at least what I believe as my role, or what I wanted to do in the auction business. Is there was an estate client that came to us, and she had just lost her son to cancer. And so it was an older woman, and she had his house and all of his stuff. And you can imagine a mom having to go through her son's house and clean it up and get rid of stuff. All the neighbors were coming over saying, well, he promised me I could have that car and I can have this. And so I had to kind of come in and get my arms around and say, hey, you guys are all going to get what you want, but you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to compete for it at the auction. So you just back up.
Mm-hmm.
And so the mother was coming to me and saying, all I really want out of this, and she was, obviously very sad that she had lost her son, but she wanted to have a car that has AC because, as you said on the beginning of this, down in Florida it's pretty hot. I'm not used to Mason City, Iowa, cold weather. So, but this mother, she just wanted a car that would have AC. Well, we sold the house and all the personal property equipment and made so much money. She could have gone and bought whatever car that she wanted. And I think that was really where I felt I
Mm-hmm.
was able to do something that nobody else could do. And I think that's really the insight that I love about being an auctioneer is that I can do stuff that nobody else can do. A realtor can put out a balloon in an open house, but they can't get a contract on that day like I can. And so it's
That's right.
that's I think the real special sauce as an auctioneer is that there's somebody that can do something that nobody else can, and that's what I kind of that was two of the stories that always kind of come to mind that I think about kind of success.
That's awesome. Going back to the Worldwide College days, because you
Oh
mentioned it.
yeah.
Um, remember, remember the time we walked into the room and the sound system was still on and that sort of thing. And tell me about it.
So going with Dustin to auction school was nice because I had somebody that had the same pressure of a father that was really larger than life, at least in my world, in my little geographic area. He was the auctioneer. And here I was having to go to school, and I'm going to have to, soon as I get back, I had the oceanographic swashbuckler where I had to dress like a pirate and get up in front of a bunch of drunk people and sell stuff. And so that was like the week back. I mean, like the 2 days after I landed, I had to do that. So it was really important that I got this auction thing down. And so you got practice during the day, and everybody did their Betty Botters and their round the rock, the ragged rascal ran, and all these things, and your numbers. But after the dust settled and everybody was out drinking, Dustin and I stayed there, and just probably, I don't know, 2-3 hours, we would just continue. Nobody in the room working on our chant with one another because we knew we had to perform right when we got back because we were going right into production. And the only other little story that I'll just follow back because I would love to hear some more about your experience in the Worldwide is that when I got back, my wife at the time, she had never seen me do an auction. And so we went, I was dressed as a pirate, and I got up on the microphone. They didn't want me to drink beforehand, so I got to have no liquid courage. They did a prayer before the auction. So all the things that I really don't like to do before we do a benefit, they did all those things. And I got up on and I did the auction. And when I got off, my wife at the time looked at me like I was Mick Jagger or some superstar. I had never gotten that type of like, oh my gosh, who are you? And that was just an experience that you'll see it a lot of times when you go to a benefit auction. Everybody's like trying to hand you a drink, or they think you're the waiter or somebody that's trying to help. But after you do the auction, everybody wants to be your friend. They're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea what you were dealing with. And so it's just interesting to get to see the two sides of people, the before and after. And that was just one of the stark things that
100%.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, well, I remember when I left Worldwide and came back to Nova Scotia. I was before going to Worldwide. I was already doing weekly car
Oh,
sales
wow.
for Mannheim
Oh,
at the
wow. I didn't
time,
know that.
and of course you get back and but I was working the ring most of the times. Like I worked the ring and did some auctioneering, for years. Like obviously before going to school, being a second generation like yourself. But when I got back, the first week back to the car auction, sure enough, they put you up on the block and you get going and that sort of thing. And that's in a different setting. That's like to dealers and that sort of thing. But then the owner of the car auction or the manager of the car auction at the time said, "Hey, listen, I got a fundraiser for you. Do you mind go doing it for me?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it for you." And it was a society raising money for a camp. It was like a summer camp for kids and that sort of thing. And they're like, okay, well, we're not like selling items, but what we're doing is we're selling pieces of the construction, like this person's going to buy the nails and this person's going to buy the
Oh,
roof
the
and
right
the
to
door
buy
and
that. How
everything else.
great is that? We need the money from you to buy these nails.
Right, exactly. So they're like, okay, so who give $3,000 for the,
The right for something,
anyways, they didn't want me to auction. They just wanted
like
me
a
to do
call to the
whatever, and they were
heart.
just
Sell
sort of bossing
nothing
me
and then give us
around. And
money. Wow.
yeah. So pretty much it bossing me around and that sort of thing. And the biggest thing about it was yeah, it was no auctioneering involved. So I got back and I said, geez, like, I wasn't even
I
doing
was
an auction.
begging.
What
I
you like,
was
I don't know
begging.
if
What
I'm
are
gonna
you
do any more
talking
of these for
about?
you, right? Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, it was definitely interesting. But now, like with fundraisers, I've been very fortunate over the years to do some really good ones. There's one that I do every year, and it's for the Special
Mm,
Olympics in Nova Scotia, and they hold a big gala and that sort of thing, and they actually value you as an
love
auctioneer.
that.
So they bring you in, they give you a nice introduction, they like to banter back and forth with you, um, and they kind of they organize it so that hey, you're not just this guy walking in the room. We'll get to you later, right? Like I'm sure you've done a lot of fundraisers where it's like, okay, you're gonna go at 8 o'clock, and you walk in, 7:30, a little early, and that sort of thing. And oh, we're running a bit late.
Always.
Next thing you know, it's 11 o'clock at night, and right. So um, eh, that's the one side about being a fundraising auctioneer, or at least like I don't do it for profit. I always donate my time to these sort of things, and
Well, you
um,
know what one free auction will
the
get you?
what's
Another
that?
free auction.
Yeah, well, that's true. Absolutely, right? 100%. Now, I've become a lot
Oh, yeah.
pickier, and I'm sure you have,
Well, if you're good at something, I
over
don't
the
think you
years
should
and
do it for
stuff.
free, and people will value you for what you value
That's right.
yourself. And so, if you give it away, they'll treat
That's
you
right.
like that too. And yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I only limit it to one or
yeah.
two now, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, that's part of it. That if you're an auctioneer, be ready to do some fundraising, right? So for that guy that's getting out of auction school today, okay. So gone to Worldwide, Mendenhall, Western Canada, whatever, that kind of stuff. All these auction schools out there. Okay, I've got my training. What should these guys know that they don't teach in auction school,
That's
in
well,
your
that's
opinion?
a great question, and one of the things I wanted to bring up a little bit before, as we were kind of talking about the chant and about they've called it the auction cry before. Have you ever heard it, the auction cry? And
Absolutely.
so, one of the ways that I was told about this is that when you're doing an estate sale and the auctioneer is out there crying for bids, kind of like when you're doing those benefit auctions and you're begging and you're crying for, this money to be brought in for the, whatever the nonprofit is that you're working for, is the way that that was is that the person that's dead didn't want to sell these items, and so now you're standing in their shoes, crying for them to be able to give them money to help their kids or to help their family deal with the loss that they just experienced. And so I think for me, and I think we did have John Nichols, which is another one of the heroes that I want to bring back, that he came to our sale and to
Mhm.
Worldwide College. And I think he definitely raised the bar, that it was like, if you want to be in this business, I think you want to try to be the very best that you can be in this business, and being able to have the empathy to stand in your client's shoes and understand the pressure that they're going through. Whatever the item is that they're selling is so important to them, and that you need to bring that level to that auction and to that item, because again, you're not just paid for the getting a great number. You're paid for the value that you're bringing to that seller or that event and selling that item. And so I think that auction cry, by standing in the footsteps or standing in the shoes of those sellers and really understanding what they're going through, that was one of the things that I don't know that we really touched on as much in the auction business at school, because we were working on our chant, the different other aspects of it. So that would be one thing. And then I think finding a mentor that has been in the auction business that you could reach out and call, getting involved in the association. I think there's a lot of chat groups and social media that you can join, and there's a lot of, you know, noise and people talking about things. And I think you're going to, but I would just definitely not be afraid to ask other auctioneers, because I think there's just a wealth of information out there. So I think that's probably, one, trying to be the best you can be, two, understanding the sellers that you're working for, and also wanting to understand the bidders. The bidders are having to give their hard-earned money for whatever they're bidding on, and then not being afraid to reach out to your auctioneer community to be able to ask for help, because I've never met an auctioneer that didn't want to help another auctioneer.
No, that's true. Absolutely. And I would say, to add on top of that, I would say, um, really focus on business, like a background, understanding how important it is to have a really good accountant or accounting background, how
Oh,
important it
yeah.
is, advertising, marketing. There's a lot of things that it's a business first, right? Um, Being an auctioneer puts everything over the top and makes it being able to, really sell and push and do that sort of thing. But a solid business background is huge when you're entering the business, especially on your own. If you're going to get out, start your own auction company and that sort of thing, absolutely.
Yeah, the
And
best.
then networking opens the doors.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just to your point there, the best thing you could do is get a friendly attorney, and having a great contract is one of the first things you want to have before
Hmm.
you get out. And then, like you were saying, the accountant is going to be the next, because you're going to want to have, you want to be make sure that you're putting everything where it needs to go, because you're hopefully going to be handling a lot of money, and you're going to want an accountant to help you make sure that you're handling that in the best way. So I think those professional people that you can bring around you is extremely important. Great point.
Hmm. So tell me, KC, are you what kind of sports guy are you? A hockey guy, a football guy, a baseball guy, a soccer guy, or lacrosse guy? Tell
Oh,
me,
oh,
about
well,
you know
thank you.
what do you follow now?
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
being from Kentucky, we have basketball there. It's pretty much our national pastime. So basketball is what we definitely like a lot. Being down here in Florida, the Miami Heat is kind of my team, I guess, now, because we don't really have a national team in Kentucky, unless you're talking about the Wildcats in college. So basketball is something I follow a
hmm
little bit, and they. So yeah, that would be my sport. I think just because you're from Canada, I'm going to say hockey is your sport. I think you played hockey as well, if I remember correctly.
absolutely.
So I think that's,
Yep,
so I think you're going to get some
yep, I
national
do.
fans from that one.
Yeah, well, big hockey.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, so now tell me, in Florida, I mean, I'm oblivious to
Sure,
geography
sure. No
sometimes. In
worries.
Florida, are you closer to Tampa? Or are you closer to the Panthers?
Well, I'm on the other coast. I'm right north of Palm Beach. So I'm like, if you look at
Okay.
Florida, there's a big lake right in the middle called Lake Okeechobee, and Tampa is on the west
Hmm.
side of that, and I'm on the east side of that. So Tampa's on the Gulf of America, I guess, side of things, and so we're on the other side, where we're on the east coast, and so we're a little bit
So are
further
you
away.
a Panthers fan or a Lightning fan? I guess
I,
Panthers or Lightning.
yeah, I guess I'm going to say Lightning, but I don't know that I have followed
Okay.
too much of it. But I do often. It's a very fast paced sport, and I love that about it, and low scoring, and so that's difficult for me. But I like playing. We When I was younger, I did play like roller hockey. So I do like to play it, but watching it was a little bit harder for me
Hmm.
sometimes. So basketball is a
Hmm.
sport that I like to watch. I like basketball.
Awesome. So, Casey, could you tell me a little bit more about what you're up to these days?
Sure. So, do some commercial real estate. We have a few little development projects that we're working in the area. I still sell real estate, putting together a couple of equipment sales. And so I guess the thing I'm doing right now is, seeing this market and understanding kind of, where and which direction it's going. And there's a lot of uncertainty here in America right now. Um, one of the things I had a auction house right after COVID, opened up an auction house and was running that for about 3.5 years. And it got extremely cumbersome with just how many people I had to hire to run the whole organization, taking pictures, uploading them to 20 different social media sites, sending out the emails, answering the questions. And so it got just so labor intensive to sell $100 item. It was costing me $100 to sell $100 item. And so that part of the business was difficult because we would use the personal property really to get into the real estate, and we wanted to sell the real estate.
That's right.
However, the real estate market here has been so hyper just growth that the real estate was sold and the realtor needed all the couches and everything sold. So we were getting the, lowest value item, but the hardest thing to sell. But, we were doing that. And that's where I kind of pulled back a little bit on doing the personal property and kind of said, I'm just going to focus in on real estate. Because there are so many other methods and ways that people can sell personal property via Facebook, Craigslist, eBay, any of the myriad of ways that the internet has figured out how to extract money from sellers to be able to, sell their items. And so I've kind of taken a little bit of a step back from some of the personal property and focused more in on the heavy equipment and the real estate now. But right now the market is just slowing down, where we're starting to see more auctions and people, at least in America, or at least in my market in South Florida, where we're starting to see some more auctions happening because things are sitting on the market a little bit longer and they're getting an opportunity to actually get to go to auction.
Well, I think that's kind of a trend everywhere, even in Canada. I mean, um, inflation, debts, everything. You know, um,
Outside
a
our
lot of people need
control.
to liquidate. 100%, 100%, right? But and that's the thing with the auction industry. There's opportunity in the tough times, and there's opportunity in the good times. I find you just need to be able to spot and work with that. COVID was definitely very challenging to a lot of auctioneers, including myself. I mean, I definitely I had to modify the way I was doing business. It became very costly to do things that way. And then with the inflation and prices, different stuff going up, I mean, I scaled back on my operations, to be honest with you, just because, how much do you put into the smaller item, and just when you could just be focusing on the bigger items to, um, you know, it costs the same amount of money to sell that same item, one item that one you could sell for $20,000, the next one $5. It's a no brainer. What are you going to work on? Right. So that's what I
Oh,
found anyway.
absolutely.
So, so I think, a lot of people want to hear your chant.
A lot of people.
So can I put you on the spot? Yeah, I think
No.
so. I think, I certainly do. I haven't heard your chant in a very long time.
Ugh.
So I want you to bring it for me. How's that
Okay.
sound?
I mean, one of the things that, and absolutely try to, create it. I think that so much of my business is performing and getting in front of that crowd, and I get so much energy off of the crowd and who is there. And again, being somebody that's a communicator, when looking at a screen and trying to be able to recreate the stage of where you are.
Hey, I'm right here. I want to buy something.
Well, we need another person.
You shipped to Nova
One
Scotia?
person at an auction is not what you want to have. It's usually better to have two. One's a lot
Okay.
more. But I mean, absolutely, I'll definitely give it my best shot for you guys. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here and we're going to be selling this home. It's a 3-2 right here in Port Salerno. It's an old wood frame house built in probably the 1950s when they knew how to build houses. And around the market here, it's probably about a afford a $500,000 house, but you're going to get an opportunity to probably get a discount. So you tell me what you want to bid, ladies and gentlemen. Who'll start me out? Who'll give me $500,000 to go? What if it 500? Nobody. 500. It's not really important where we start. It's much more important where we end. Who'll give me 400? Let's go. $400,000. What if it 4? Anybody have that 4?
I'll give you 2, sir.
200. Wow, I appreciate your bidding. But you're the only guy here. This is going to be a long one. All right, I'll take the 200. What if it 200 and now 50? I got 200 here. What if it 50? I need 200 and now 50. 50, 250. And when there's not another guy in the crowd, unless I was going to run somebody up like that or use the internet where, hey, I got 250 online. Yeah. Your turn, 300. 250, now 300. What if it 300? You're out. Put it at 300. I got 250 against you. Now 300. Now but 3 here. Now 50. 350. I got 300 right here with Dustin going to Canada. How about 350? Anybody at 350? 325. I got 325 right here online. Now 50. Your turn. 350. Come on, Dustin. Don't let it go now. 350. We're at 325. And you want 350. Thank you. I appreciate it. I was going to have to do some complicated math there. You know that. 350 now 75. Bit of a 375. 375. 360. All right, I'll take it because it was more money than we had. 360 now. What if it is 70? How about 70? 370. Your turn, Dustin. 370. Sure. I want you at all my auctions, Dustin. You're the best bidder I've ever had. 370 now 80. Bit of a 380. Anybody else? 380. Sold it to my friend Dustin Barker in Nova Scotia.
Thank you, KC. I've been looking for some Florida real estate, so that
absolutely. We'll
go
ahead and bring it over.
All right.
10% deposit. Awesome. You just go ahead and Venmo that right over, and we'll get this going.
So, Casey, I would like to thank you very much for joining us on our first ever Auctioneer Podcast. Okay, thank you for joining us. It's been real excellent to catch up a little bit and hear about your stories and that sort of thing. And is just before we go and that sort of thing, how can people reach you, Casey? Some of your handles.
I mean, just Casey Daniel at me is my email. You can I think Google me, Casey Daniel, South Florida Auctioneer, and I think you'll be able to find some of the stuff we're doing there. And Dustin, I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to other auctioneers and get to see you. It's been a long time, and I'm happy to be on the podcast.
Well, thank you once again. It's an honor, Casey. That's it for today's episode, ladies and gentlemen. Keep your eyes out for episode 2 of The Auctioneer coming soon.
Thank you.